Hello, comrades. This is Brother Soldier today. Coming back to visit with you and to break bread once again. We had kind of wrapped up the last sessions on courage, respect, and likability. Had about like 5 parts to that. Talked a little bit about fear in the part two of that topic and how fear paralyzes people and causes them not to do what's right when it's really the right thing to do. Fear is a big factor in why people respond and behave and the way they do. They're afraid of death, or they're afraid of being harmed, they're afraid of being, they're easily intimidated, and they're afraid of losing their job, a pension, a home, credibility with people, their reputation. I think that fear, people say there's nothing to fear but fear itself. Just be afraid to be fearful, because once you are fearful, anything goes. You will bow to anything once you succumb to fear. So, in this part, I want to talk a little bit about fear and some experiences that I've learned about in uh, recent past, and things that we have to know that are realistic and that we have to be able to understand it's part of life. Even animals become afraid. But one thing we cannot do is have the kind of fear that causes us to go back into slavery, or that causes us to go back into colonization, or that causes us to go back to Jim Crow in North America, that causes us to go back to servitude. According to the book Black Revolts by Joseph Scott, he said one of the main behaviors that preceded being enslaved in North America was servitude. Prior to them being slaves, they were servants. And when the laws changed, they became slaves. Those that were in the Americas at the time that the laws were changed. We will visit this in the near future, but right now I'm just focusing on fear. When you have a history, as I've said it before, and I keep driving this home, of what has happened to us while we're sojourning on this planet, we have a obligation as stewards never to allow this slave or the colonization to happen again. We have an obligation to the future generations. We have an obligation to the people who have fought, bled, and died. Never again shall we go back. So fear may have one positive element that I can touch on, is that you're afraid to go back to what you were going back to, so you do something about it because of that kind of fear. And I think that kind of fear is an awakening kind of saying that you are afraid to go back into something, so let's do something about it. Let's prevent it. So in that sense, it may be working for you to your benefit. So anyway, let's touch on fear. I want to go to an athlete, a football player, American football player in the United States named Kaepernick, and I'm sure some of you have heard about him and how he took a knee, got down on one knee during the national anthem because of his protests against the police violence that were going on against people of color, black men in the United States. And as a result of a country and a nation in a football team in 2024. I'm sorry, as far as 2024. Whenever this happened, it must have been like 2015, 2016 or something, where the young man was 5 years professional football player. And I think till this day, he's not back in the sports because they basically, to me, I'm an observer going through racism myself in the United States. They basically punished the brother and ostracized him for standing against it. Just because they're paying him a salary to play football doesn't mean that they have power over his political views. And I think it took a lot of courage for him to do that. Just like the 3 athletes back in the 60s that put their fists up when they were track runners, or they put their fist up and protest against the things that were going on against their people. Just like Muhammad Ali stood up against the draft because he was saying that it was not only against his religious beliefs, but it was against his political views about how blacks were treated, that they had no right to be trying to get any of those brothers to do something when they're not given full rights as people on the continent. So these were protests that these guys have been punished or suffered for. And it tells me that the same conditions practically apply today as they did 60 some odd years ago. And the wake-up call is about, these brothers demonstrated courage, even though I know that all of them had some kind of, they were afraid to a certain degree. They demonstrated courage. Their courage was stronger than their fear. But at the point of doing it, you can see why. Because of the way the nation reacted to them. Some people loved them for it, many people hated them. And a lot of times we're going to have to take those stands where people are going to hate you. They hated Christ. Some of them hated King. They shot him. Does that sound like love to you? So, fear cannot be the determining factor of what we will and what we will not do. The determining factor needs to be what is the right thing to do at the time, at the hour. Looking at the big picture, what is in the best interest of us as a struggling people? There's some young men out there that are dead, brains blown out because they stood for what they felt was right, or they were at the wrong place at the wrong time, and they were young and deprived of their life because some psychopath cop blew his head off because he looked at him as trash and a thug, but never knew anything about the young boy's character or anything. He just happened to be there. Or it may not have been a cop, it was just a regular civilian that killed the boy, killed the young man. So I applaud the people who thrive to be courageous and thrive to try to move forward and try to make sure things are changed. I applaud those people, those champions, and those people who stood by them and supported them. But for the people who ostracized them and who raised their voice against them just because you disagreed and punished them where they couldn't be no longer an athlete, stripping them, that lets me know where you stand with your Creator as well. Some of them, people that did these guys like this, go to church. Some of them profess to be believers. But I don't think there's a place for you type of people in the kingdom according to what I've read and studied. There is no place for you except a place where there's a gnashing and a weeping and a gnashing of teeth. That's your place. I'm going to read something to you. See if I have it right here. In 1 John chapter 2, verse 21, it says, "No lie is of the truth. So there's just going to be a distinct difference between truth and lie. If people see something wrong and they decide to stand up and speak to it, and they get punished by the system, what is the system telling them? That the system no longer wants to follow what is right in the sight of God, but they want to practice might over right and make you feel apologetic for the things that you know to do is right, make you feel like you're doing wrong. We're in a time like this. It is becoming more burdensome as we move forward. So the question comes back to the Black African. What are you going to do in such a time as this? Are you going to continue to move forward and hope for the best in a system that does not love you, that hates your sons, that hates your ancestors? Some of them, many of times without cause. Well, how long will you thrive with such a system? When is it that you're going to see the writing on the wall? This is not a question to our oppressors, because I will talk to the oppressor, and I feel led I'm going to bring a message to the oppressor. But as far as the Black African, what does it take for you to understand that you're not loved, you're not wanted? And when are you going to start drawing lines and gulfs between you and them in order to live right? You remember, I go back to this story again. It has different meanings, the same story. Back to Moses' time and Joseph. There rose a king that knew not Joseph. In other words, there rose a king that didn't give a darn about what Joseph did, the dreams, the interpretations, how he helped them through the famine of Egypt, all of that. There rose a king that did not care. His people, Joseph's people, integrated into Egypt. And then there came a time when Moses made an exodus to separate from Egypt. Now we only have not a racial divide in North America, we have a moral divide. I mean, we had all of these from the beginning, but we have a more deeper moral divide now, where they're imposing things on our youth. So fear is not going to have any space for us going forward. Fear has to be cast aside. You have to do what's right. You have to do what's godly. You have to do what's moral. In order to be counted worthy, you're going to have to go forth in your faith, in your religion, and your political views. Because both of them and all of them are under attack. And you're going to have to make some decisions whether you're going to separate as much as possible from such damning events that we're hearing about every day. So I want to just touch on fear. I want to just rap about it. And like I said, there's a couple other scriptures that says fear hath torment. There's a scripture that says perfect love casts out fear. So fear not those who are able to kill the body only and not the soul, but rather fear him that is able to kill both body and soul. Matthew chapter 10, verse 28. So, fear is not our companion. We have to go forth with conviction, a conviction to do what's right. So I just give those words to encourage you to stay, keep your head up. And I will conclude here. God bless you. I'll be back with a bigger topic momentarily. Hotep.